Mr. Geoff Donnelly. Please go ahead, sir.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to thank everyone for attending this webinar on how speech analytics can improve your collections revenues. I'll introduce myself. I'm Geoff Donnelly. I'm a Senior Sales Engineer at Noble Systems here in the UK. Assisting me on this webinar will be Mike Sarr and Ed Creasy from Nexidia. A couple of house rules that are in place on this call. All your phone lines are muted. If you have any questions, there is a question bar at the top of the webinar page. If you can just type your questions into there. At the end of the webinar, there'll be a Q&A session where we'll address them questions. Any questions that we don't get around to doing, there will be a follow-up email that comes out very shortly after this webinar. One other house rule, if you could just ensure that your computer speakers are turned off as well, as this may interfere with some of the content of the webinar. So let's just look at some of the objectives we've got for today. Firstly, we're going to introduce both Noble Systems and Nexidia and give you a brief background on what both companies are. We're then going to look at why we use speech analytics technologies, how the technology works, and then the use of speech analytics in debt collection specifically. We're then going to touch on some business benefits and a case study before going into the Q&A session. Okay, so let's start by having a look at Noble Systems for those of you that do not know who Noble Systems are. Noble Systems are a market leader in inbound and outbound blended contact management solutions. We have more than 3,000 clients worldwide, and about 70% of these are actually in the collection space. Our technology has been award-winning. We've got various awards that's been presented to us over the past few years. In particular, the Call Centre Helpers Top 10 Award that was presented to us last year. This was voted independently by users of contact centre technologies, and we were very, very pleased to be placed within the top 10 of that. We've also received various Frost & Sullivan Awards for our expertise in outbound dialing systems. Let's now look at, give you a view of some of the customers that we have throughout the UK and worldwide. You can see there's a vast array of customers ranging from outsourcing to collections. We cover the whole sphere of contact centre companies. Hopefully this gives you a good feel of who we supply as a company. I guess you're wondering what our relationship is then with Nexidia. Well, we've got a strong joint partnership with Nexidia that's been built for many years now. It started off many years ago. Both companies are actually based and head office in Atlanta, Georgia. So this basically gives us a sort of the close location of our head offices and basically the closeness of our thinking gave a great synergy to both companies. We've managed to have proven principles in both the US and the UK. We've got multiple customers between us where we've deployed our solutions. And together it's solid technology focus from both recording to speech analytics. At this stage then, I'd like to hand over to Mike Sarr and Ed Creasy of Nexidia, who will now take you through the speech analytics tools. Thank you.
Thanks, Geoff. This is Mike Sarr from Nexidia. I'm Sales Director for our UK Contact Centre operations. I'm just going to take you through a brief introduction and then hand over to my colleague Ed, who will take you through how we can create the benefits for the collections industry, and then I'll wrap up at the end with a brief summary and a Q&A. So very briefly, I'll explain who we are, who uses our technology. We'll explain very lightly how it works, and then we'll dig into how we can use it in practice with collections industry companies to drive both revenue and increase compliance. So apologies that, first of all, the title has this very strange look. It seems our shadow doesn't go very well on the web client that's being used, so apologies for that. So basically, we are an audio business intelligence software publisher. We've won multiple awards, as you can see. We seem to win awards year in, year out, and the reason for that is that we have a technology that's patented. It's designed to enable companies to derive business insights from interactions between their collections agents and your debtors or customers, however you wish to view them. And what we're able to do is give you competitive advantage by giving you insight into those conversations and enabling you to drive process improvement and improved compliance. Sorry, we have an extra slide in there that caught me by surprise. We have a wide range of customers. Basically, these are range from very large corporate organizations to smaller organizations who are using our technology in specialized ways. Really, I guess the key message is that our technology can be applied across multiple industry types, and it doesn't matter whether you're one of the world's largest companies or you're a small or medium-sized company, our technology can drive business benefit for you. So let's look into why you should use Nexidia. Basically, let me just explain first what speech analytics is. It's a way of automatically collecting and analyzing information from simple human voice recordings. And what we're able to do is categorize the types of conversations that are taking place and use that to create analytical data to drive business insight. So what effectively that does is that makes the conversations between the sort of people that you see on the right-hand side of the screen searchable, and that enables us to mine data from it, and from that data you gain this intelligence. Let me explain a bit more why. So if you think about typical human conversations, what people tend to do is discuss in very unstructured ways things that are important to them in a conversation. Typically your collectors will be following some form of structure, but the debtors won't. So what we're able to do is actually listen to the things that are being said and use that to drive profiles that allow us to create cool drivers. As a result of being able to create these cool drivers, we're able to quantify as to how many times certain things are being said and what does that mean in the context of your business processes. And also we start to give you root cause analysis that you can then use to help engineer process change. So one of the things that we need to make clear is that there is no real miracle in this technology, but it is something that is extremely sophisticated. So there are a few myths that we find in our industry. And the first thing is that people have this belief that you can capture anything that's said anywhere by anyone. That's not current reality today because of the way people speak to each other, the wide variety of accents, and the different speed and pace that people speak at. So what we're able to do is to actually mine information and give you a very high percentage of hits. So anywhere between 80 to 90% confidence on a phrase or words that are said in a conversation. But unfortunately today there is no way of giving you 100% confidence. But we do obviously analyze 100% of the calls that are presented from the call recorder. There are other technologies out there that I'll just briefly talk about. One is something called speech-to-text, where basically speech is converted into text that you read. This is an old type of technology. It's been in use for quite some time, but it has a high error rate. What we mean by that is it misinterprets a lot of what's being said. and as a result you can have content as much as 40% that is not correctly displayed. That obviously means that any data you derive from it is less useful than a more accurate technology. We use a technology that's called phonetics, and basically in a moment I'll explain what phonetics is, but we basically have optimized this technology to listen for phrases rather than single words, although we can listen for single words. What this means is that we are able to accurately derive a much higher rate of detection and give you statistically much better quality information. We often come across questions saying, can you detect emotion? And there are some organizations in the market today that are claiming they can detect it. The challenge, however, that we find technically is that telephone conversations remove, using compression, the frequency ranges of the human voice where most emotion could be detected. So unless you've got studio recordings, studio quality recordings, it's extremely difficult to reliably predict that. In addition, cultural differences between different nationalities show that one type of nationality you would think would be having an argument by the pace and tone of their speech. Actually, they're having a normal discussion. Furthermore, you find that some people, when they complain in a quiet voice. Others actually shout. Now, again, how you detect emotion when you have such extremes of human behavior is extremely difficult. We personally believe that it's best to focus on the words that are said rather than variance in volume, pitch, and tone. So speech analytics, from our perspective, is about providing statistically reliable results from a large body of audio. And our product is ready to run in 35 languages and does not require you to create any specialized dictionaries. Our language packs load and go. So we focus then on what we call the real issues are, which is speed to business insight, the level of accuracy of the results, and I said that was anywhere between 80 to 90% confidence level, and most importantly, what is relevant to your business issues. And a little later on, we will explain that to you. Right. So what we're going to have to do for this audio slide to make sure you can all hear the audio content is a little bit old-fashioned. I'm going to put a phone by a speaker. Hopefully you'll all be able to hear this.
Here's how it works. Our technology can parse any audio track into specific discrete sounds called phonemes, which are the smallest units of human speech. Search terms are then compared to their phonetic equivalents in the audio, allowing the user to jump to any point in the file where a match occurred. With the fastest available indexing speed in the market, Nexidia can process over 20,000 hours per day on a single server. Compared to traditional methods that rely on transcribing audio to a text file, Nexidia searches are faster, more scalable, and accurate, and do not rely on cumbersome dictionaries, supporting immediate searches of proper names, slang, and industry jargon. Nexidia's phonetic approach to audio search also enables rapid development of language models. 35 languages are currently supported, and new models are continually being added. Language models are developed based on actual audio data, incorporating thousands of hours of various accents, dialects, and non-native speakers. As a result of the rapid index and search capabilities, entire bodies of content can now be made discoverable to generate a significant return on investment.
Sorry, we're just trying to find going back to the slide presentation. Fantastic. Okay. Right. Thank you for that. So let's just now look at the typical debt collection challenges. Typically, what you find with debtor management is the biggest challenge, first of all, as you all know, is actually connecting to the debtor. So when you do actually get through to a debtor, the key aspect of any interaction is to make best use of that contact. And what we typically find is that most organizations have professional and repeatable processes that are designed to allow and ensure that debt collectors actually deliver the business model that you've designed. And typically what we are interested in finding out is, are your collections agents actually following this process, and are they following your best practice? And that actually is the biggest challenge for most businesses, because the only way you can really determine that is to have some form of manual quality monitoring process where you listen to individual collectors. And indeed, that is the process that's used by many companies today. What we will go on to explain in a moment is why that is very challenging and why that might not be yielding the best performance results for your company. What we're also interested in trying to help businesses look at is how they can improve the promise-to-pay ratios. This is ultimately what drives your revenue and your profitability. We will discuss in the next few slides how we can monitor actual collector performance, how we can extract maximum payments from debtors when we interact with them, ensuring consistency, making sure you're compliant to regulations, and improving coaching throughout the organization. So what I just want to explain is kind of our approach to business benefits. And what we do is we basically help you get insight into the interactions that you have with your debtor. And if you think about this, what that enables you to do initially is to get some insight to tactical objectives that you may have within your business. So what we've put on this circle here are some examples of different types of tactical objectives. And typically those objectives are being used in order to increase core business benefits, such as improving business processes, improving collector performance, monitoring compliance, or increasing general market intelligence. And finally, that should then focus in your attainment of corporate goals, which would typically be around increasing or decreasing, so increasing performance of the collectors, decreasing operational costs, and ultimately focusing on your revenue performance as a business. Now, the key point really about what I'm trying to show here is that our technology can help you build up this benefits picture and help you drive performance in those core corporate goals. So what I'm going to do now is hand over to my colleague Ed Creasy, and he's going to explain to you how we actually make this happen in practice.
Okay, thanks, Mike. So really the key point about my role here is I actually deliver this stuff, and I've been working on change programs in the UK for 3.5 years, specifically one for the last 12 months with a debt collection agency. So there's three things we're going to look at today. One is the principles, so really the core processes we follow. The second area, the specific techniques we use that are bespoke to debt collection. And finally, I'm sure you'll be interested in some of the results we found. So what we're going to kick off with is some of these generic tools that we use. So we have a range of reporting, trending, and measurement tools that we use to do this. We start off with automatic discovery. Now this is important because in the industry there has been some perceived complexity about setting this up. So we have a tool called Nexidia ESP, and what this delivers is an automatic discovery of relevant topics. We do this by automatically scanning through all relevant documents, websites, web chats, forums about your organization, and this creates a key vocabulary that enables us to quickly discover what's happening in your conversation and automatically gain visibility into critical issues. So it provides some advanced visual reporting. We can see some examples here under topic A, and as with everything in Nexidia, you're one click away from the voice of the customer, so it takes you to that precise point in the call where something of interest is happening. So in summary, ESP makes it easy to get started. You get a very strong initial narrative, but critically it's a jumping off point for a more empirical analysis with Nexidia ESI, which is at a section B here. Now, ESI is our flagship tool. It allows you to drill more deeply into the data and the indicative trends from ESP. You can identify trends. You can combine your analysis with the rich metadata that's available in call recorders and other CRM systems and debt management systems, and then you can drive down to the why, the root cause analysis of this business intelligence, and that's the key aim. Is finding business intelligence to give a real and quantifiable return. Now, by mining caller intent, understanding why people are calling, we can improve compliance, we can drive revenues, we can increase efficiency. So to give you simple examples for compliance, we can identify every time a customer refers to the Ombudsman from thousands of hours of calls. For revenue, we can identify what sort of payment is can obtain, from a full payment to a token payment, and then with efficiency, we can isolate those call types which have longer durations or shorter durations, and we use something called speech queries. Now, these are very simple buckets of calls. They're a structured search that are relevant to the business objectives that Mike talked about earlier, and the types of categories we identify are what we call call drivers, so the reason for the call, whether it's being outbound or inbound, the processes that are contained in those calls are the real critical area for collections, and the advisor and customer behaviours in those calls, and that enables us to do automatic reporting. You can see an example of a dashboard here, and it enables you to quantify the issue accurately at scale. We provide a range of reports and metrics, so we have dashboards for a high-level view of performance. We have a range of different reports to understand and quantify trends and to identify outliers, and within that we have three very important metrics. We have volume, so the number of calls in a particular category, but again, this is based on what is in the conversation. Then we look at the talk times of those calls. So again, it's a unique way of looking at call durations based on the conversation. And then a new metric we call non-talk, or it's silence. We identify 4 seconds or more of silence. Now, this isn't available in current systems, and it's the hidden cost within your calls. So once we've automatically started to identify caller intent and processes, we want to drill down to the root causes. And we do this in two ways. We can either use drill into these reports or actually investigate by listening to calls. If we look at reports first, we have a range of reports that drill into caller intent. If we start with a simple trend report, let's use a real example from the collections industry. We created one of these speech queries that identified whenever the card payment process was carried out, and then we did a trend report intraday. So every 30 minutes we were measuring how much silence were in the calls where a card payment was made, and what we found was 2 spikes at lunchtime and in early evenings. And the organisation we're working with had no idea that a web-based system for payments was causing high non-talk, therefore longer call durations at this time of the day, and it gave the quantification, the empirical information to actually turn that into a client-based system. Another example is correlations. You can see an example under C here of a correlation report, and the type of categories we can start to correlate would be, let's look at all the calls where we took a payment, for example, on a credit or a debit card, and let's look at all the calls where we offered an automated payment to a customer and look at the relationship and trying to understand, are we trying to get people onto automated payments rather than ringing in every month? The other thing we can look at is a talk time distribution. We've got an example here just under section D. The reason that's important is we can look at the average duration for calls. So, for example, if we looked at an average duration of a call with a debtor profile, we could say, well, actually, how normally distributed are those? What's the deviation of those? What does a long call look like? If our average is 700 seconds, how many calls are over 1,000 seconds? And finally, first call resolution is a critical issue in contact centres, and this can be applied for the debt collection industry. So we can look at which customers are being called multiple times, and we bring together a series of calls based on the customer ID or the CLI, and we can identify if agents are making errors in the way they're collecting, if the calls are being dispositioned incorrectly, or perhaps the dial is being programmed incorrectly. So there's a very powerful way using reports to filter down to root causes. The second way is investigating calls, and that's really getting your headphones on and listening to calls. Now, as I said, you're always one click away from the call in ESI. You're taken to the precise point in the call, as the video showed, but also you have almost like bookmarks of other issues in the call, so you might know where a full balance was asked for, but later in the call you might also find where a token payment was taken. You don't have to listen to the whole call. You can navigate that call based on different conversational elements. You can search hundreds of thousands of calls with ad hoc searches in the same way you do a Google search. There's rich collaboration tools where you can annotate calls and assign them to colleagues so you can work within the organisation. And finally, we have a root cause analysis technique where you can categorize calls even further. So we have a really rich set of tools to get down to the why, the root cause. critically, if we look at Do They, monetizing is core to everything we do. We always look at the ROI, and we do this both in our reports and in our training and professional services we offer. So this starts at project design. We need to understand what is strategically and operationally important to you. We need to identify the cost of your business, the revenue opportunities you have, and then we build financial models that feed into our analysis. And then when we've got some findings from mining caller intent and from doing root cause analysis, then we extrapolate this to your annual call volumes or your annual revenues, and there's the key metrics we use. What are the total volumes of calls you take, the total volumes of right party contacts, what's your average revenue per call, your average revenue per payment, what's your conversion rates, and there we can give you two models to justify this investment. One is increasing payments. You all know your average payment rates. If you can increase them by 1%, and I can give you the models of how we did that, what will be the return? In the same way, let's say we reduce that non-talk indicator. That would make you more efficient. That would mean you'd have more capacity in your collection center. You could then make or take more calls. What's your average return per call? And you can work out your investment that way. And the outcome is you'll get a return on investment for your activities, and it justifies whether it's just the investment in the technology or it's the investment on internal projects to change things. It's a very significant way of justifying this investment, and particular to debt collection, because there's obviously some significant implications of breaking compliance, right up to losing your license to trade. But also, if we look at revenue, the ratchet effect in credit, where you're actually potentially getting up to sort of £25 to £50 average per call if you get a promise to pay, then you don't have to increase too many of those a year to get a return on investment. Compare that to your average outsourced contact center when they're 25p a minute and trying to reduce costs. You have a much more significant way of building an ROI. So the next stage is looking at acting upon this information that we've identified and we've monetized. And what we can do is deliver information to different stakeholders. You can have team leaders for coaching, you can have compliance managers and analysts who are changing procedures. So it gives you three change techniques. There's some very targeted coaching we'll talk about shortly. There's the process improvement, this closed loop process improvement, this support, and then an early warning compliance systems that I'll talk about in a couple of case studies. The final point of the process is continuously measure. So if you've initially baselined something when you've mined caller intent and you've got down to the why and then you've acted upon it, you can then have all the tools available to measure whether you've improved the processes you want to change. So what we're going to move on to now is actually some of the specific techniques we're using within the debt collection industry. And the first critical issue really is the ability to look at 100% of calls. Now, scalability enables even the largest collectors, and we'll see shortly a very large collector in the States, able to look at 100% of their calls. And it will give you an ability to look at information that's locked in your call recorder or in your debt management system that you've never been able to access before. Traditionally, people are sampling agents 3 to 5 calls a month, which is normally 0.1% of all their calls. Now you can stop sampling and analyze all their calls, and if you're having to investigate calls for compliance reasons, you can search every call for whatever is said in the call. The second element here is integrating metadata. So these massively enhance your reporting, and really we've leveraged the relationship with Noble, who have incredible information in their outbound dialer system, with the ability to integrate this into our speech analytics. So you can see an example here on the right-hand side. It's a little bit small, but this is our forensic search tool, and all of these columns on that on that forensic search tool are information from the metadata. So I can filter by various elements, by time. I can look at date, by time, duration of the call, the silence in the call. I can analyze within the hierarchy by site, by team manager, by agent, even by customer ID. I can look at telephony information like DNIS and direction. I can look at the debt status, so the amount of debt, or the whether the customer's in default or on a payment plan. And finally, I can look at the call outcomes. So what was the collector's opinion of what happened on that call compared to what actually happened in the conversation? Now, at the next stage, we start to look at performance versus best practice. So you can see an example again. This chart on the bottom right-hand corner of the slide shows in these blue bars here, that is people asking for payment, and along this x-axis that is advisors. So very simply, this collector, and this is real data, was able to see one advisor was asking for payment just over 20% of the time, another one was over 60% of the time. So as Mike said, most debt collection agencies have some sort of process, some sort of hierarchy of going through from the full balance to a settlement to an installment right through to a token payment. And the question is, do you truly understand if these are followed in your conversations? So, for example, when it comes to requesting payment, do you know how many collectors are asking for full balance compared to collectors getting through and accepting a settlement or even just taking a holding payment? And then when customers are making payment, are the customers on the best payment method for either you as a business or for themselves? So are they calling every month to make a card payment, or can we get them on some sort of automation? If we look at call outcome, obviously a lot of decisions in the dialer and the business are based on the outcome of the code. We can question whether collectors are coding the call correctly. Is this account in dispute really? The next area we can look at is identifying calls at risk, and what we find in all our experience working both in the contact center industry and in the legal industry is the response to an investigation is almost as important, or if not more, than the breach itself. So speech analytics can help you deal with the existing regulations that exist at the moment, but most importantly, as these change over time, it gives you the agility to respond to new ones and to deal with complaints potentially before they're escalated. So if we look at complaints and disputes, if you consider what is the cost of actually dealing with a complaint, and add to that the cost of the fines and the potential credits you're giving back to debtors, this is preventable if the complaint can be flagged automatically, because you often find about these things too late when they've complained to a regulator or to yourselves in writing. So what we do is deliver information to compliance managers' desktops for customers who are saying they're unhappy with their treatment. I want to speak to a manager, I want to speak to a team leader, or simply the fact that they're just disputing debts. And from the regulation point of view, we flag these using two approaches. One can be simple mentions of the regulator. So you've got thousands of hours of calls, someone who wants to speak to the Office of Fair Trading. You tag those calls, you can look at them in near real time and make a decision whether you need to investigate them further. On the other side, certain regulators do require scripts or processes to be followed, and we can put those into buckets of those who do and those who don't follow those processes. Finally, there's a strong transformative element when it comes to coaching. So firstly, as I said earlier, team leaders can now coach on 100% of calls because they're extracting 100%, which makes it fairer both for the organisation and for the advisor. And advisors and collectors absolutely love this, being coached on 100% rather than 2 or 3 a month. So you have targeted coaching where you can look at payment requests down to an advisor level. So what was the average payment performance? What was the range of performance? I can now target calls where payment's not requested. I can get customers onto automated payments. I can get to the relevant calls quicker, and we'll hear a little bit more about that in our case studies. So moving on to some of the more generic results of doing this, building on those techniques I've just talked about, if we look at payment techniques in themselves, the context here is how many people are actually asking for payment. And our approach is using the speech queries is to categorize, put into buckets all the different payment techniques. You can see how many people ask full balance against how many people offer a settlement. And in the US, a debt collection agency who expected their agents to ask for payment in all calls found that they were only asking for payment in 60% of their calls. And when they actually asked for it, they weren't even asking for full payment. In fact, they immediately offered a 50% settlement. So that gives you an incredible opportunity for targeted coaching. You can coach around calls where you get a promise to pay and say, okay, we got a promise, but did we optimize that opportunity? Where were the opportunities to uplift? And using the UK example recently, we've been targeting the team leaders to coach where the agents were asking for full balance, and we achieved a 10-point increase by just, instead of coaching on the normal call audit sheet where you've got 30 or 40 different behaviors to look for, we said we're going to target full balance, and we drove it up within 1 month by 10 points. If we look at right party conversions, the key question here is what is happening when we speak to a debtor but we don't get a promise to pay or a payment. And our approach is, firstly, we use metadata, so we know from the disposition code whether the call got a promise to pay or we spoke to the customer but we didn't get a promise. Then we combine that with queries, so the queries that identify the type of payment techniques that were used on that call. So what we're identifying is calls where we got through to the customer, we used collection techniques, but we didn't get a payment. And then we target team leaders to coach around those calls. And the outcome of those in both the UK and the US has been to drive up conversion rates. So we're reducing the amount of right-party contacts that don't end up in a promise to pay, and increasing effectiveness. So the amount of time, the amount of hours these collectors are on the dialer has driven up cash collection per hour. So we've had some great results looking at the revenue side of things. If we move over to compliance and reputational risk, there are these two distinct processes. It's simply, are we following the procedure or aren't we around compliance, and what calls are at reputational risk? The type of examples around scripting, which is more relevant in the US because they have more scripting, is around verifying right-party contact. So did they get through to the debtor correctly? Are they delivering regulatory required scripts like the mini Miranda, which in the States is a communication that confirms you're speaking to a debt collector, or other scripts around correct use of voicemail and proper disclosures of third parties? Around reputational risk, it's more about identifying threatening calls and then handing them off to legal counsel or compliance teams for them to immediately isolate the cases they want to investigate. Results-wise, in the US they identified $200,000 worth of potential violations that they weren't even aware of. If we look at the last two areas briefly, first call resolution is kind of an odd concept in some ways to look at in the collection industry. It's more about traditional contact centers, but we use two approaches to address it. One is using speech queries, and that's where we can identify, for example, if you're taking payments every month, receiving calls from customers, why don't we automate it? And why don't we use those time on the dialer to call customers who aren't paying? If we're telling people to call back, so for example, we can use queries to identify when customers are told to call back. It's very inefficient because it's going to eat into our margins if we have to make 2 or 3 calls to get a single payment. So we can use speech queries that way, and it's ultimately saying, can we reduce traffic? Can we reduce incoming calls to make more outbound calls and collect more revenue? The other side is using metadata. We can look at what we call call series, so customers who we call multiple times, or short calls, short calls less than 5 seconds. Now, this is early days. We don't have an actual case study in the UK yet, but you hopefully will be hearing about one later this summer. But the type of results we've seen are looking at people making regular card payments and found less than 1% of them actually getting them onto some sort of automated payment option. We found new ways of filtering calls to identify collector behaviours you just can't get to at the moment. For example, looking at collectors who are having very, very short calls and identifying what's the average and who are the outliers. And finally, dispelling some myths. If people are saying the dialer's not working, and I'm speaking to customers who've been spoken many times before, we can, using our first call resolution tool, identify customers who've been called 5 times in one day and really understand if they've been called in error or not. The final element is call tagging, and this is the integration of media and metadata that enables you to find information that you can't get to at the moment. So 3 examples here. One is it's all around call dispositioning. So if you tag a call that's, let's say, 10 minutes long and you've got a promise to pay, but you tag it as a message, well then you're probably, according to your dialer rules, going to call them within 2 or 3 days, which potentially could lead to a dispute with the customer. And flipping that on its head, you could actually tag, an advisor could tag something as a promise to pay, which is actually they just left a message and didn't get to speak to the debtor. And ultimately, if you think you've got a promise to pay, you won't ring them for another 7, 10, 15 days, and that you're missing opportunities to collect then. So there's 2 approaches that are very effective there. Finally, we can also look at when messages are left and the correlation between a good, clear message and collection. So we found when people didn't leave a message at all, there was about a 1 in 10 chance the customer would call back. And then if people left a good, clear message about what they wanted the customer to, there was a 1 in 4 chance of them calling back. And then we saw there was a very strong correlation between an incoming call from the customer and a payment. So those are some sort of generic examples of the results that we find. And if we just look just briefly before I finish off a specific case study, and to be honest, I would recommend going to www.nexidia.com and look at the Plaza case study. Now, Plaza, very, very large debt management company in New York City, employ 400 people there, hundreds others offshore. And their challenge was they've got constantly changing regulation in the US, so they've got stringent state and federal laws, but they've also got modifications in those laws coming forward all the time, and they needed a proactive approach. So their key objectives here were to understand what their advisors were saying, what they weren't saying, and identify where it was in the call. And ultimately, you can see the results here. They were able to look at 100% of calls. They increased their scale, and they automatically analysed 285,000 calls a week. They've improved their team leaders' productivity by 30%. So they've done this by, as I said earlier, delivering information to their desktop with succinct information in one place about their advisor performance. They've driven revenue up, their performance rates have improved. They're doing this by understanding what are my best performers saying in their calls versus what are the bottom collectors saying. That gives them opportunities to identify improvements, and then they can effectively roll them out with this tool. And finally, they've been able to reduce risk by measuring and responding to these areas that should be said in calls, that shouldn't be said in calls. They can react to potential lawsuits, and they feel they're ensuring that all calls adhere to current policies, and they can easily adapt to future policies. So as a summary, the way, and this is in Plaza's words rather than ours, they feel that now they have a massive competitive advantage. They're a thought leader within their industry. They've got technology that their competitors don't have access to, which gives them a cutting edge when it comes to collecting, and ultimately it's a win-win for them because they're improving compliance whilst they're driving revenue up. Okay, I'm going to pass you back to Mike now.
Thanks, Ed. That's great stuff. So just now to briefly summarize, the way that our technology is embedded in your contact centers is pretty simple. We take calls either from your recorder or from your switches, and we process 100% of those through our software technology. As Ed explained, we're able to give you a very quick and easy idea as to the key themes of conversations using a product that we call ESP, which without any programming is going to just show you what are frequently used phrases and show you potential relationships between those phrases, enabling you to understand the types of conversations your agents have with your debtors. Then, using our analytical product, ESI, we're actually able to help you understand the real data behind these conversations, mine that data, and help you do two things: focus on your compliance risks and manage those compliance cases, and also understand individual agent performance so that you can improve coaching, focus on revenue generation activities, and try and improve debtor and collector interactions so that you collect more money more quickly and help your business prosper. Moving on to a kind of headline summary. Our technology uses an underlying capability that is incredibly fast. So we can actually, on a single server, process as much as 1,600 hours of audio per hour. So whatever size your contact center, for very little investment cost, we can actually listen to the calls that you take without you requiring something the size of a Cray supercomputer to perform that for you. Secondly, the product, which has 9 patents against it, has an extremely accurate way of identifying key phrases in the audio that you have, so that you can drive this data and use it to make your business process improvements. The results are gained quickly because you don't need to tune any particular language model. Our product works out of the box and connects easily to your recording architecture. And finally, we have a whole set of tools within the product to make sure that the results you get are relevant and help you drive your business initiatives. So that basically concludes our presentation, and I'd like to hand back to Jeff now so that we can manage the question and answers.
Yeah, I'd like to thank both Mike and Ed for that excellent presentation. Hopefully you can see why Noble Systems partners with Nexidia. They've got a vast knowledge in this business and a great understanding of how the technology is used in the contact center environment. we've had a couple of questions that have come in during this session, so I'm just going to run through them. Hopefully both Mike and Ed can help out on the answers. The first one is, from your experience, how do agents accept this type of technology?
Really positively, and I know that sounds like the obvious answer, but we've got examples in a major UK contact centre where the unions, who normally everyone shuddered at their involvement, almost insisted that every single department had this technology implemented because it's fairer. But it's fairer in both ways. Agents aren't assessed on 3 calls a month. I was an agent, and if one of my 3 calls a month was, maybe when I wasn't in the best of form, I felt it was unfair. Whereas if I'm being assessed on every call, it's fairer on me, but it's also fairer on the company. So, we had a recent example where people who were potentially being promoted were looked at in a different light because they had more information about that person. Now, yes, people may say that's a negative side. That's fairer for the business because you know more about their performance. But on the opposite side, you had, I've got examples in the UK of agents who have been continually underperforming, suddenly with this targeted coaching hitting their targets. Now, that is the most powerful thing for agent morale. So these are agents who are advocates of it. They'll talk within their organisations about what it's done for them. And so, all in all, it's very positive.
Excellent, thank you guys. Another question we've had in from the floor is, how can you prove it's going to work for my business? Now that's one I can attempt to answer, and hopefully Mike and Ed can chip in with some content as well. But we've deployed this at many locations, and the first thing we look at doing is actually coming in with the software and actually providing a proof of concept. Now this proof of concept looks at a particular business stream, and based on predefined and pre-agreed success criteria, we can actually take your recordings, run it through the tools, and actually give the results of the analysis. I don't know, Mike or Ed, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. I mean, just a minor point to add to it really is that this is something that takes place over a handful of days, and we take a reasonable audio sample. And because this technology is new and it's not particularly well understood in general industry yet, we have an approach of absolutely proving its value, being able to sit down with potential customers and actually build a business case that has a strong return on investment. Typically we find most proof of concepts will, particularly in the collections industry, generate around a 6-month return on investment given the type of business you have. And that is down to the very ratcheted returns, as Ed mentioned earlier in his presentation. Back to you, Jeff.
Okay, thank you there, Mike. Another couple of questions that have come in from the floor. First one is, where does the software sit? Is it on their own servers, or is it a deployment that we have to put in from externally?
The answer is both. It can be either. We have an on-premise license offering, but we also have a hosted on-demand offering. So we hope we have a solution that will fit your needs.
Okay, and the last question, how easy is the system to integrate into existing back-office systems?
Of course, I'm going to do the classic answer of that depends. But just to give you an idea, we've integrated to over 40 call recorders worldwide, so we certainly got a great deal of expertise on integrating to call recorders. The other types of systems we've integrated into, we've got examples in the UK where we've integrated both into the call recorder and the debt management system. We've integrated into HR systems to get information, for example, like collector tenure out. So, yeah, we have to obviously test the architecture, but we have over 40 user-defined fields that we can populate with information about those calls.
Okay, excellent. Thank you for that, guys. That actually concludes the question and answer session. I'd like to thank both speakers, Mike and Ed, for the time and effort on this webinar. I'd also like to thank all the attendees for taking the time out of their busy schedules to take part in this webinar. We did have a couple of problems earlier on the audio side, so if anyone missed getting onto the audio, has been a recording made of the full session. A link will be sent out to you very shortly after this webinar concludes. So hopefully then you can play that back and get the bits you missed. So again, thank you all for your time on this webinar, and goodbye.